The silence in my apartment after that phone call was a physical presence, thick and heavy, and I remember just standing in the middle of my living room, the worn carpet beneath my bare feet, and feeling as if the ground itself had shifted, as if the very floorboards that I had saved for months to refinish were no longer solid, no longer mine. It's a strange thing, to have your own history rewritten for you in a single sentence. All those childhood moments, the family vacations, the Christmases, the birthdays, they all suddenly took on a different hue. A different meaning, as if I were looking at them through a stained glass window, the colors all dark and distorted. I started to remember things I had long forgotten, or perhaps had chosen not to see. I remembered my sister's ballet recitals, how my parents would sit in the front row, beaming, a video camera in my father's hand, and how at my science fair presentations, if they came at all, they would stand at the back, looking at their watches, their smiles tight and impatient. I was good at science, I loved the logic of it, the clear cause and effect, but to them it was just a hobby, not a passion, not something worthy of a stage or a spotlight or $80,000. I think that was the core of it, you see. My sister's dreams were loud and beautiful, they had a soundtrack and a visual component, they were something you could boast about to friends at a cocktail party. Our daughter is studying the Baroque period in Paris. It sounds magnificent. My dreams were quiet, internal, they were about building a foundation, a home, a stable life, and there is no romance in stability, there is no glory in a down payment. There is only the quiet, uncelebrated work of making a life, brick by brick, and I suppose they found that mundane, unworthy of their investment. The days bled into weeks after that call, and I went to work, I paid my bills, I talked to friends, but it was like I was moving through water. Everything was slow and muffled, and those 5 words were a constant echo in my mind, a mantra of rejection. I found myself looking at my hands, at the small scars and calluses earned from years of working and fixing things, and I wondered what made them so undeserving. What was the fundamental flaw in me that made me less than? Was it because I didn't follow the path they had so clearly laid out for my sister? Was it because I questioned things, because I argued, because I had the audacity to make my own mistakes and learn from them in my own messy way? My sister called me a few times, her voice bubbling with excitement about her apartment in the Marais, about her professors, about the light in Paris in the autumn, and I forced cheer into my voice. I told her I was so happy for her. And I truly was, but it was a painful kind of happiness. A happiness that highlighted my own loneliness, my own feeling of being left behind, not just geographically, but in the hierarchy of our family's affection. I couldn't bring myself to tell her what our parents had said. It would have cast a shadow over her joy, and that didn't seem fair. Her dream shouldn't be tarnished by my reality. So I carried it alone, this heavy, ugly secret, this verdict on my character. I started walking more long, aimless walks through my own city, which suddenly seemed drab and ordinary compared to the postcard-perfect images she sent me. And on these walks, I began to notice things I'd never seen before. I noticed the small, stubborn gardens people planted in their tiny front yards, the way the old brick of a building would soak up the afternoon sun, the quiet dignity of a neighborhood bar where everyone knew each other's name. This was my Paris, I realized. This unglamorous, uncelebrated city was my world to conquer, not with a parent's checkbook, but with my own 2 hands. And that's when the shift began, so subtle at first I almost didn't notice it. The anger, the profound hurt, began to curdle into something else, something harder and more determined. It was a quiet, simmering resolve. If I didn't deserve their help, then I would have to deserve my own. If my dreams were not worthy of their investment, then I would have to be the investor. I looked at my savings account, a meager sum compared to the fortune they had given my sister, and I saw it not as a pittance but as a seed. A very small, very fragile seed, but a seed nonetheless. I started reading, late into the night, not for pleasure, but for a plan. I read about real estate, about interest rates, about neighborhoods that were up and coming. I took a second job, freelance work that drained me but filled my bank account, slowly, agonizingly slowly. Every extra dollar I earned felt like a tiny act of defiance, a small stone I was adding to my own foundation, a foundation they said I didn't deserve to have. It was exhausting, and there were many nights I cried from sheer fatigue, from the loneliness of the struggle, but the tears felt different now. They weren't tears of self-pity, they were tears of effort, like sweat, and they felt clean. I stopped calling my parents as often, the conversations were too stilted, too full of landmines, and I needed to protect this fragile new thing growing inside me, this sense of self-reliance. They noticed, of course, and their calls became more frequent, their tones laced with a new, bewildered concern. They asked if I was okay, if I was angry about something, and I would just say I was busy, I was working, which was the truth but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that I was building a moat around my heart, and the drawbridge was up. A year passed in this way, a blur of work and saving and quiet determination. My sister came back from Paris, fluent in French and full of stories, her worldview expanded, her confidence soaring. She got a job at a gallery in New York, another glamorous chapter, and my parents were, of course, ecstatic. The contrast between her homecoming and my own quiet life was stark, but it didn't hurt as much anymore. I was on a different path, and I was starting to appreciate the scenery. And then, the twist, the moment that changed everything. I found it. A small, run-down cottage on the edge of town, a foreclosure that needed more work than I could possibly afford, but it had a for sale sign that was faded and crooked, and something about its forlorn state called to me. The roof was sagging, the paint was peeling, the garden was a jungle of weeds, but the windows were intact and the front porch looked out over a field of wildflowers. It was the kind of place they would have hated, a money pit, a disaster. I called the realtor, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I went to see it. The inside was worse than the outside, smelling of damp and neglect, but I could see it, I could really see it. I could see myself sanding the floors, painting the walls a warm, sunny yellow, fixing the leaky faucet in the tiny kitchen. It was a crazy idea. It was an impossible idea, but it was my idea. I poured all my savings, every single dollar I had saved and scraped and sacrificed for, into the down payment. It wiped me out completely. I had nothing left, not even for a celebratory dinner. The day I got the keys, I went to the empty cottage and sat on the dusty floor of the living room, and I cried, not from sadness, but from a profound, overwhelming sense of ownership. This was mine. Every cracked piece of plaster, every creaky floorboard, every single problem was mine. I had earned it, no one had given it to me, and in that moment the echo of my father's words finally faded. "You don't deserve any help." Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't deserve help. Maybe I deserved something better. I deserved the strength I found in myself. I deserved the pride that swelled in my chest as I held those cold metal keys. I deserved the calluses that would soon return to my hands from the work that lay ahead. The work was hard, harder than I could have ever imagined. I learned to patch drywall from online videos, my hair and clothes constantly covered in a fine white dust. I learned basic plumbing, how to fix a running toilet, how to unclog a drain, each small victory feeling like a university degree. I spent weekends at the hardware store, becoming a familiar face to the staff, who would offer me advice and sometimes a sympathetic smile. I was tired, perpetually tired, but it was a good tiredness, the kind that comes from building something with your own hands. My social life dwindled to almost nothing, but the solitude didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt focused, purposeful. My parents, aware now that I had bought a house, were confused. They couldn't understand how I had managed it. Their offers of help, when they finally came, were tentative, almost awkward. "Do you need any help with anything?" my mother asked once, her voice hesitant on the phone. And I found myself saying, "No, thank you, I've got it." And I meant it. I didn't need their money, and I realized, more importantly, I didn't need their validation anymore. The house was my validation. Every painted wall, every repaired step was a testament to my own worth. My sister came to visit one weekend, her designer clothes looking out of place amid the drop cloths and paint cans. She walked through the dusty rooms, a strange look on her face, a mixture of pity and something else, something I couldn't quite identify. "It's a lot of work, isn't it?" she said, and I just smiled and said, "Yes, it is." She didn't understand that the work was the whole point. Her dream had been handed to her, fully formed, like a beautiful, pre-packaged gift. My dream was something I was creating from the splinters and the dust, and in the creating, I was rediscovering myself. I was no longer the daughter who didn't deserve help. I was the woman who could build her own damn house. And then, another twist, one I never saw coming. My father showed up unannounced one Saturday morning. I was on a ladder, scraping old paint from the eaves, my hair tied up in a bandana, covered in sweat and grime. I saw his car pull into the gravel driveway, and my first instinct was panic, a childish fear of being judged. But I climbed down the ladder and waited for him. He got out of the car and just stood there for a long moment, looking at the house, at the progress I had made. He didn't say anything. He just walked slowly towards the porch, his eyes taking in the new shingles I'd painstakingly nailed down, the fresh coat of white paint on the trim, the cleared garden where I'd started a vegetable patch. He stopped in front of me, and I saw his eyes were glistening. My father, the man of final, harsh judgments, had tears in his eyes. "You did all this yourself?" he asked, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't name. I just nodded, unable to speak. He looked at my hands, at the scratches and the dried paint, and then he did something he hadn't done since I was a little girl. He reached out and took one of my hands in his own hand soft and uncalloused compared to mine. "I was wrong," he said, the words simple and direct, and so powerful they felt like a physical blow. "We were wrong. We thought we were helping your sister by giving her wings, but we were just carrying her. You grew your own." He didn't offer me money then. He didn't need to. The apology, the recognition, was worth more than $80,000. It was worth more than any amount of money. It was the closure I never knew I needed. He stayed for a few hours that day, not offering advice, just watching me work, sometimes handing me a tool, and it was the most peaceful, the most connected I had ever felt with him. The story didn't end with a magical reconciliation where everything was perfect, because life isn't like that. My relationship with my parents is still complicated, there are still scars, but the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. They saw me now, truly saw me, not as a disappointment, but as a force of nature. The final twist, the one that makes me smile now, is that my sister, for all her glamour and worldliness, has begun to call me for advice. About her finances, about her relationship, about life. She sees the stability I've built, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself, and she, in her own way, is a little in awe of it. The one who was told she didn't deserve help has become the family's pillar. There's a profound irony in that, a quiet justice that comforts me on difficult days. I still live in that cottage. The wildflowers in the field bloom every spring. The floorboards still creak in a familiar, friendly way. And sometimes, when the light slants through the windows just right, I look around at this home I built with my own hands and my own will, and I feel a gratitude so deep it aches. They gave my sister Paris, but they gave me something far more valuable. They gave me the gift of myself. And I ask you, have you ever been told you weren't good enough? Have you ever felt the sting of being overlooked, of your dreams being deemed unworthy? What if that rejection was not a door slamming shut, but a key, a harsh, ugly key that unlocked a strength inside you that you never knew you possessed? What if the very thing meant to break you was the very thing that taught you how to build? The paint can was heavy in my hand, a solid, comforting weight, and as I poured the rich, deep blue into the tray, the smell was sharp and clean, the smell of a new beginning. I was painting the front door of the cottage, this final act feeling like a ceremony, a way to seal all the effort and emotion into the very wood of the house. My father's words, "I was wrong," had settled inside me, not with a dramatic clap of thunder, but like a gentle rain after a long drought, soaking into the hard, parched ground of my heart and allowing something new to grow. It wasn't that everything was instantly perfect, far from it. There were still family dinners where the conversation would carefully skate around the past, where my sister's achievements were still announced with a certain fanfare, while mine were acknowledged with a quieter, more thoughtful respect. But the sting was gone. The poison had been drawn. I could listen to them talk about her gallery opening in Chelsea and feel genuine pride, because my own world, my own kingdom of weathered wood and wildflowers, was just as real, just as valid. The validation I had craved for so long had finally come from the outside, but by the time it arrived, I found I didn't need it to survive anymore. I had built my own internal validation, brick by brick, and it was a much sturdier structure. The cottage became more than a house. It became a sanctuary, not just for me, but for others. Friends would come over and marvel not at its beauty, for it was still simple and humble, but at its feeling, its atmosphere of peace and solidity. They said it felt grounded, and I knew that was because it was built on the foundation of my own resilience. I started a small garden in the back, growing tomatoes and herbs, my hands once again in the earth, but this time it was a choice, a pleasure, not a struggle. I learned the quiet rhythm of the seasons in my own little plot of land, the patient waiting for seeds to sprout, the joy of the first harvest. It was a slow, patient kind of magic, so different from the instant gratification of a plane ticket to Paris, and in its way, so much more profound. My relationship with my sister evolved in this new landscape. The old jealousy had melted away, replaced by a mutual, if sometimes bewildered, respect. She visited more often, shedding her city skin at my doorstep, and I saw her sometimes, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, just looking out at the field, a quietness on her face that I rarely saw in her fast-paced life. She confessed to me one evening, her voice soft in the twilight, that she sometimes felt adrift, that her life was a series of beautiful, fleeting moments, but that my home felt like an anchor. She was envious, she said, of my certainty. The irony was so rich and so complete it was almost funny. The one who had been given everything envied the one who had been given nothing. It was then I understood that my parents' gift to her, while generous, had also been a burden in its own way. A path already paved, with expectations laid out like stones. My path, forged through the brambles with my own bleeding hands, was wholly my own, and there was an immense freedom in that. Years have a way of smoothing the edges of even the sharpest memories. Now, when I think back to that phone call, to the 5 words that shattered my world, I feel a strange sense of gratitude. It was a brutal gift, but a gift nonetheless. It forced me to look inward, to find resources I didn't know I had, to become the architect of my own life. My parents are older now, gentler. My father often comes over on Sundays to help me with little projects around the house, not because I need the help, but because he enjoys it. We work in comfortable silence, or he'll tell me stories about his own youth, things I never knew, his own struggles and doubts. It's a new chapter in our relationship, built not on parent and child, but on 2 adults who have finally learned to see each other. He sees the woman I became, and I see the man he is, flawed and human, capable of making grave mistakes, and more importantly, capable of genuine remorse. The $80,000 is just a number now, a relic from a different time. My sister's year in Paris is a beautiful album of memories in our family's history. But my cottage, this quiet, sturdy place, is a living, breathing thing. It stands as a testament to a different kind of wealth, the kind that can't be wired from a bank account, the kind that is earned through sweat and tears and sheer stubborn will. It is the wealth of self-knowledge, of resilience, of knowing that no matter what storms may come, you have built your own shelter, and you can withstand them. The story doesn't have a neat ending because it's still being written. There are still challenges, there are still days of doubt, but the core of me is unshakable now. I look out my blue front door at the wildflowers swaying in the breeze, and I am at peace. The little girl who craved her parents' approval is still a part of me, but she is comforted now. She is safe inside the home the woman built. And sometimes, in the deep quiet of the night, I whisper a thank you to the universe for the harsh lesson, for the painful blessing, for the day I was told I didn't deserve any help, because it was the day I started to learn that I deserved something infinitely more valuable, myself. And so I ask you, as this story settles around us like the evening light, what is the thing you were told you couldn't have? What is the dream that was dismissed by others, or even by yourself? And what might be waiting for you on the other side of that disappointment, if you were to pick up the tools, whatever they may be, and begin, slowly and patiently, to build it for yourself? You have reached the end of the text.